Welcome to another edition of the Routine Jumper Daily Podcast, the podcast where we discuss everything NBA basketball. I'm your host, Jalon Dixon, and today we've got a ton of things to get into. But before we get started, remember to like, comment, and subscribe for daily NBA content. We are on the road to 1,000 subscribers and trying to become one of the biggest NBA podcasts here on the YouTube platform. Now, I know for anybody that's been keeping up with the podcast over the last 2 weeks, you're looking at the setup and you're saying, bro, things look different. What's going on? Well, on Fridays, I tend to be a little bit more busy, so I wanted to create a segment for Fridays that would allow me to still get an episode out, but something that's a little bit faster, something a little bit more compact. So I'm calling it Routine Jumpers Rapid Fire Fridays. Very simple. 20 minutes, 5 topics, quick thoughts on each of the things that I kind of have been focusing on over the course of the week. Things that might not be caught in the national headlines, but topics that I think are going to be important as regard to either the outlook of the league, the importance to that particular team, showing love or showing some credit to players or teams that might not get talked about in national media often. Just little things that are on my mind about the NBA, kind of all jam-packed into 20 minutes, quickly and compact for you guys to watch and listen to. So let's go ahead and get right into it, starting with Coach Willie Green of the New Orleans Pelicans, who looks like he is on the hot seat as he has lost the locker room. Reports say there has been a growing sentiment around the NBA that Green has lost the Pelicans locker room, and that was evident on Wednesday night on the road against the Denver Nuggets. One of Green's most questionable decisions to begin the season was starting 37-year-old center DeAndre Jordan, who just signed with the team on Friday over all-rookie center Yves Missi in Denver. Amid the Pelicans' 0-4 start to the season, several players have appeared disinterested and frustrated with how Green's lineups are being handled, sources said. These displeasures have been visible on the team's bench as well as heard behind the scenes in the tunnel and locker room. Through the team's first handful of games, star forward Zion Williamson has been seen engaging more than usual with associate head coach James Borrego, former head coach of the Charlotte Hornets, I must add, during his pregame warmups and routine. Here's the thing. For me, the Charlotte Hornets have been one of those franchises that doesn't know how to let go of something when it's not working. The Charlotte Hornets have been resting on the laurels of that in-season tournament run where they kind of looked like a rendition of that Phoenix Suns squad that absolutely balled out in the bubble and just barely missed the playoffs. And they had a very similar situation where we never got to see Zion play a single postseason game, but he did shine in the play-in tournament. And they've kind of convinced themselves that they can get back to that level if they can get a healthy Zion Williamson. But guess what? The basketball gods have sent them many warnings year after year, especially these last 2 seasons in particular, of striking down their players, signaling in whatever way humanly possible to go ahead and make a drastic change. Look, this team already folded themselves by putting themselves in a bad position, trading this year's draft pick to the Atlanta Hawks, one that looks like it might be a top 5 pick for an Atlanta Hawks team that's trying to build either next to or beyond Trae Young, right? This New Orleans Pelicans team doesn't know how to get out of their own way. And my rule of thumb when it comes to coaches, and especially when it comes to firing coaches, is this is very simple. First, you have to identify what the coaching pool looks like. So we have guys like Mike Malone and Tom Thibodeau out on the coaching market. So you have viable names, as well as James Borrego, who has real head coaching experience. You have viable names in the pool as potential replacements. Okay, cool. So you have replacement candidates. Number 2, has your coach done something that is considered a fireable offense? That can be underperformance, which depending on how you look at a team like the New Orleans Pelicans, you could say he's underperformed or he's done the best with what he's had given their injury situation. The number 2 thing that typically can be the easiest way to can a coach is if they've lost the locker room, because especially when you have a youthful locker room like this one where there's not too much of a veteran presence, having the grip on the locker room is your best asset to being able to develop players long term. Once you've lost that respect, and that's for any locker room, but especially for a locker room this young, once you've lost that level of respect, They have now checked out on you. They now no longer believe you have their best interest in mind. They no longer believe that you're trying to build towards having a real winning culture. And they look to you as more of a detriment than a help. And as the leader of men in that situation as the head coach, if you are viewed more as a liability than somebody who can help uplift a talented roster, then you're somebody that needs to be out of the way because you no longer contribute to the service that you've been brought in to do. And for Coach Willie Green, I hate to say it. And I know he has ties to New Orleans, given the fact that he used to play for the New Orleans Hornets all those years ago. But the reality of the situation is the guy just has not been able to produce. He has not been able to get a winning product out of this team. And I know he's been dealt some tough cards with Zion Williamson injured, Brandon Ingram in and out of the lineup, CJ McCollum being on their team, now not being on their team. Their injury-riddled roster on a year-to-year basis. He's been dealt a tough card. But once you start making moves like starting DeAndre Jordan only a day or two into him being signed over Yves Missi, who clearly should be the starter for this team. I understand that Kevon Looney is injured, but that's not a big enough excuse. That's not a good enough excuse to be starting DeAndre Jordan over Yves Missi when this team is as youthful as they are. And this is a team that should be playing towards being athletic, playing fast, and being in transition a ton. And we all know that at this advanced age, DeAndre Jordan is just not that. So the loss of real respect within that locker room, I think, is going to cost him his job. And I would not be surprised if by no later than the midway point of November, if not sooner, I think we could be looking at James Borrego as the interim head coach with Willie Green kicked to the can. If I'm the New Orleans Pelicans, I think you kick this can while you have the open opportunity and while the news is spiraling that this guy is starting to lose grip on this situation, because the New Orleans Pelicans, they've been terrible at being able to read the room in the past. This is a perfect opportunity to show, at least to a certain extent, that you're still a competent organization, even if we're still questioning it on a day-to-day basis with certain stuff that you guys do. Nonetheless, make the move. You don't have to make it now, but you need to make it soon. Next up, let's talk about Ryan Rollins. Ryan Rollins is averaging 15.3 points per game, 4.3 assists, 3.8 rebounds, shooting nearly 48% from the field, 35% from beyond the arc, a true shooting of 63%, which is like in the ballpark of like a rim running center in today's NBA. And he's averaging 3 steals, scored 30 plus points in the win over Golden State, his former team. And the reason why I'm just so interested in Ryan Rollins with what he's been able to do so far this season is because he's a smaller representation of something that I think is a big storyline a lot of people don't talk about in today's NBA. You know, in the NBA and in sports in general, there's this weird discussion around the idea of guys needing to be ready-made out the gate when they are drafted, right? And I think there's plenty of representations around the league of guys that just simply need to either develop over time to grow into the kind of player that they're projected to be, or they simply just need a better situation. Sometimes the first team you're drafted to isn't the team that can actualize what your real upside is. This is going to be some high praise in terms of the guys I'm comparing him to, but I'm only comparing it in form of situation, not necessarily talent. But one of my favorite players in the NBA is Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. I'll tell this story a million times and then some. Shai Gilgeous-Alexander became my favorite player because of the road he's taken to become an MVP. He started out with the LA Clippers as a rookie behind Lou Williams and Patrick Beverley. Then he goes to the Oklahoma City Thunder, but he plays third fiddle in that backcourt next to Dennis Schroeder and Chris Paul. Then he's handed the keys. They're still bad, but he shows signs of being a good starting point guard. Then ascends to being an all-star. Then ascends to being MVP of the league and finals MVP for the best ranked team in the Western Conference with a chance to go back-to-back this season. He did the work. He put the time in, and he was in a situation where over time he got to develop. But we may have never seen that as a member of the Clippers. We might have never gotten a chance to truly see it. You can let guys like Lou Williams and Patrick Beverley tell you on podcasts that they saw signs of greatness in him when he played with the Clippers, but I don't think we would have ever seen him truly actualize the talent he's reached now in a Clippers uniform. Another guy that I think is really interesting but didn't necessarily do it the same way in terms of changing teams, but I think did it in the way of taking these kind of progressive steps is Austin Reeves, the talk of the town this this year. I talked about it in yesterday's episode of him taking these steps from going undrafted and betting on himself. He negated a bunch of different opportunities where teams were clamoring to get him in the undrafted free agent market, and he directed himself to land in the laps of the Los Angeles Lakers. He started out as a role player, coming off the bench, just providing some kind of ball handling and shooting, and then he becomes, a third option next to LeBron James and Anthony Davis, and then LeBron James and Luka Doncic. And now with no Luka, no LeBron on the floor, he's showing in his development how much he can be a primary ball handler, somebody who can make good decisions. He's leading the league in assists right now, and he's taken those steps where all he needed to do, he said, all right, bet, I'm going to go undrafted despite the fact that I know I'm a talented player. Bet. I'm going to take my talents to somewhere where I think I have the best chance to thrive, and then I'm going to make the most out of my opportunity. And he's done exactly that. Another guy who I think is a perfect example of this, Jalen Brunson. Many people will tell you in that Dallas Mavericks locker room and in that front office that they saw real chance of Jalen Brunson being like a big time player at the point guard position. But none of them could have told you that he would be a fringe MVP. Nobody told you that nobody could have expected him to be that kind of guy. Yes, we saw signs of greatness with what he was able to do next to Luka Doncic, and in the playoffs when Luka Doncic was injured, we saw signs that he had something special to him. But despite being an older player, there's still another gear he could hit, and some were worried that there wasn't that gear wasn't present. Then he goes to New York, one of the toughest places to play in the NBA, one of the toughest places to play in sports in general, and he thrives. And within his first 2 years, he's already being negotiated. He's already been in the conversation as an MVP candidate, an All NBA player, somebody who might be a top 5 player at the position, right? These are all representations that sometimes your first place you're drafted to isn't necessarily the place that you're going to thrive at, right? Ryan Rollins, I don't know if he has the upside of these guys that I'm using as examples, but I think he's a smaller representation of the storyline that many don't discuss in sports nowadays, which is sometimes you got to bake something in the oven before you can get it the way you want. Not everything can get thrown in the microwave and still come out pretty. He's one of those players where I think with Golden State, they just didn't know what they had in him. And with the Golden State Warriors system, it's very prevalent. You look at what they're dealing with Jonathan Kuminga. He's been there for years. They've won a championship even with him on their roster. But it took until this season, this beginning portion of the year, for him to finally look like for the first time he really fits into the system that they play. Sometimes when you play for these types of teams, they just don't know what they have in you just yet, or they never find out what they have in you because they play a certain way that these players just do not fit into. And now Ryan Rollins with Giannis Antetokounmpo in and out of the lineup with question marks at the guard position with Kevin Porter Jr. being injured and Cole Anthony being on the bench for you. Ryan Rollins has taken real opportunity to step up and be a force at the guard position. He's been an absolute menace playing passing lanes, and I think he's been good on on-ball situations, guarding on the perimeter. That's where the steals are coming from. He's hitting the three at a decent clip, and at the same time, he's just looked like a real decent on-ball option for them, which is going to be something special throughout the year because they've needed to figure they desperately needed to figure out who was going to be that guy for them next to Giannis Antetokounmpo, because it's not going to be Miles Turner. Miles Turner isn't even averaging double figures so far this season. Miles is averaging like 8.7 points, and I think he's got like nearly 8 rebounds a game, which is like a career high for him. But he's done more of like the dirty work stuff on offense and defense, not stuff that's going to pop up on the stat sheet for you. But Kyle Kuzma's been injured. Giannis has been in and out of the lineup. There's no real offensive punch there, and Ryan Rollins has been somebody who's been able to bring some of that to the table for this Milwaukee Bucks team. So shout out to him. Again, do I think he's going to be some kind of star guard? Do I think he's going to be the Damian Lillard replacement? I don't know if it's all of that, but he's been a big time steal for this Bucks team, been a bright spot for a young season for this Bucks team, and somebody that I think is always going to fit on a championship caliber or at least a playoff contention type of roster. This is the kind of player that those type of teams love to have, and he's thriving in this new role. And I'm going to be paying a lot of attention to him because I think he's going to be a really interesting player this season, an X factor even for this Milwaukee Bucks team. Next, let's talk about Nikola Topić. Found out that he has testicular cancer, and that's tough. I'm not gonna lie. That's some tough stuff because he's gonna have to go through chemotherapy. I believe he's actually already began chemotherapy, and I'm gonna be honest with you. This feels like a shot from the NBA gods that just will not allow the Oklahoma City Thunder to get any more blessings beyond what they've already achieved after winning a championship last season, right? You know, they get two cherries on top to their defensive infrastructure with guys like Isaiah Hartenstein and Alex Caruso, who they got for the cheap basically last season. You have a number 2/number 3 option who's one of the best rim protectors in the NBA and Chet Holmgren. You get Jalen Williams, who people are arguing is a top 3 small forward in the NBA. Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, an MVP. You get AJ Mitchell, who shows out as a rookie last season and is picking up where he last left off with this year, being a great fill-in. You got Cason Wallace coming off the bench, Aaron Wiggins coming off the bench, Isaiah Joe all coming off the bench, hitting threes and playing defense at a high level, looking like a very special and deep basketball team. And here you got Nikola Topić, this cheap replacement option for Josh Giddey as like this high-level, prolific passer, good decision maker, and a dude who I genuinely believe could have the upside of like the best version of Nikola Topić could be like, in my opinion, maybe like a Ricky Rubio type, like the best, like a top 5 assist man in the league, someone who could be a relatively consistent shooter from beyond the arc, not a knockdown shooter, but somebody that you could at least trust to knock a couple shots down from back there. He can run an offense. He can get guys open in the open floor. He's great in transition as a passer. That's the kind of guy that Nikola Topić was going to be able to be for the Oklahoma City Thunder. And we've yet to be able to see it in an actual NBA regulation game, only little spurts here and there in summer league and also the preseason. So it's very unfortunate. I send prayers to him and his family because he's dealing with something that's pretty heavy. And the news on him is pretty good, at least. Coach Mark Daigneault spoke on it a little bit, saying he's doing great given the circumstances, which is unsurprising. But there's no one at 20 years old more equipped with the maturity, discipline, and toughness to handle a situation like this than he is. Our locker room, there's no locker room that I believe is more equipped to encourage and support someone through something like this than our locker room. We've got his back. He knows that. He's around. He's been around. He'll continue to be around, and everybody will do the best they can. But we're very confident in the person and the prognosis and the environment that we have around him as we go through this with him. So there's a family environment. This team is rolling. They're 6-0 right now. And it's crazy to think that they're this special and they've had injuries to the roster already. They're missing their second best player. This former lottery pick in Nikola Topić was an absolute steal for them as just a luxury item. And they still get to sit and say that they haven't even seen him play an official NBA game yet. Not to mention they got Thomas Sorber out of Georgetown this past NBA draft, and he's going to miss the entire year. It's crazy to think that this Thunder team is so talented, so special, and yet here we are looking at them in 2025, and they still haven't even view the entirety of what they can truly do because some of their players that are truly special on the bench haven't played a single game yet because of injury or otherwise. So shout out to Nikola Topić. Hope he does get to play an NBA game very, very soon. Would love to see him a little bit on the floor this season, hopefully at some point. But the Thunder trudge on. They're doing very solid without him, but I know there's so much more in front. Next up, we got the Charlotte Hornets. Rookies are looking great, man. A lot of people are not going to talk about the Charlotte Hornets, but in that game against the Orlando Magic where they did lose, they did something they've never done in franchise history, starting 3 rookies for the first time with Ryan Kalkbrenner, Knueppel, and Jalon James. And these guys have been special so far this season. Do I think this is a team that's going to make noise in the postseason? No, I don't know if it's going to be that crazy, but Ryan Kalkbrenner has been a great fill-in / replacement for Mark Williams. He's been a big-time rebounder and been somebody that's consistent as a putback man on the glass. He's just been a steady guy who's fit early and often at that center position and is just someone who seems to be kind of veteran minded. He's come in and just knows how to do his job and fit at a high level. Knueppel set a record for most threes hit by a rookie through his first 4 games with 16. He's been highly efficient and highly effective as a high volume 3-point shooter and a connector. A lot of the the different comps for him were ball handlers that could be tertiary ball handlers, 3-point shooters, and just guys who could be good connectors on offense to help with getting the ball around, moving in transition, and just being a dude who can fill in next to your point guard or next to a bunch of different lineups. And Khan's been exactly that. And then Sion James, he's 3-and-D guard, right? Coming out of Duke, knock down 3-point shooter and use your big burly frame to be a big time defender on the perimeter. He's been exactly that. He's shooting 70% from beyond the arc, the best of any rookie in the NBA, I believe. And I think he's right there with VJ Edgecombe as far as 3-point shooting is concerned from beyond the arc as well. These three have all been stars in their role. Again, do I know what this Charlotte Hornets team is going to look like moving forward as far as making some kind of run towards the playoffs? No, but I think that through 4 to 5 games, this team has shown real signs of life. And again, this team, I said it an episode or two ago about competency, right? That's one of my favorite words when you're talking about organizations. Year after year after year, you look at teams where you ask them, why does this squad look like a dumpster fire? The talent is there. Or why does this squad look like a dumpster fire? It seems like every single year they go through the exact same thing. And usually the issue is because whether it's up top with the organization, the actual roster construction itself, or the head coach, there's usually someone that's not in alignment with what building a franchise really looks like. For the Charlotte Hornets, their biggest issue for the longest, outside of obviously Michael Jordan having a lot of say in terms of how this roster was constructed, their biggest issue was just simply the fact that they didn't have real NBA players on the roster. I mean, guys who could really contribute in the league. It was too many Nick Smith Jr.'s and guys of that ilk that were just dudes who had really great upside but didn't have a real feel for the game and didn't necessarily come in as basketball players, just athletes who happen to be good at basketball, but not high IQ guys who can come in and fit within a real system. And then you make this draft where you bring in Khan, you get in Sion James, you get in Ryan Kalkbrenner, you bring in Colin Sexton from Utah, and all of a sudden you've got something that's kind of clicking where you look at a roster that goes 8-9 deep, where everybody just really knows how to play at a high level, and all of a sudden they look competent. They look competent and they look like a team to watch out for, where on a night-to-night basis, they're going to run it up. This is the best 3-point shooting team in the NBA right now. They're top 10 in pace of play. They're one of the best teams in terms of assists this season. And a lot of that has to do with the fact that these guys just finally have a roster where everybody knows how to play high IQ basketball. The Charlotte Hornets, I'm not saying they're going to be the Detroit Pistons of last year or the Houston Rockets of last year, but could they be like that? Could they be like that Phoenix Suns team where that year particularly, where the year before they looked terrible, then that next season of the bubble year, they come in, they run the table in the bubble, and they look like the team that next year will be like, you know what? They're going to be something next year. They're going to really be a problem somewhere next year. And maybe they don't take the jump that the Phoenix Suns did, where they absolutely leaped from where they were the season prior. But going from a team that won out in the bubble and just barely missed the playoffs to making the run that they did, maybe that's not in the future for Charlotte, but maybe something similar is in the future, where maybe this season they mess around and get the 8th seed in the Eastern Conference and they get mollywopped in the first round, but you look at them and you're like, okay, they're actually working with something finally. They're a team that's not going to just get mixed up in the play-in tournament. They're a team that looks like they can be competitive on a night-to-night basis. They look like a team that has a handful of blue-chip prospects that are going to be a part of this long-term core. And they finally got some guys that can stick. Shout out to this rookie class, man. They're going to be special, and I wouldn't be surprised if at the end of the season, all 3 of these guys were named to the All-NBA rookie teams, because, it's 10 spots. And so far, these 3 have been 3 of the best rookies so far this season, in my personal opinion. Last but not least, we got to talk about Michael Jordan and what he said about load management. Now, look, I'm not going to go too deep into this because that could be its own podcast depending on who you talk to. But as far as I'm concerned, he's right. He says it shouldn't be needed. First and foremost, I never wanted to miss a game because it was an opportunity to prove. It was something that I felt like, the fans were there. They're watching me play. I want to impress that guy way up on the top who probably worked his ass off to get a ticket or to get money to buy the ticket. He's totally right. Look, I'm going to take the words straight from the horse's mouth. Adam Silver said this is an entertainment league. Okay, well, guess what? Load management is about competitive advantage. Load management is meant to put your superstar in a position where he's healthy for when they make a postseason run so that he's more than prepared and able to be able to produce at the highest level under those circumstances. That's about preserving competitive balance. If you're just an entertainment league, provide entertainment. That starts with your superstars being on the floor every night. If they are willing and able, and primarily able, they should be playing on a night-to-night basis, because at the end of the day, it is right. Not every team has a superstar. Some teams have their fan base coming in to see games to see an opposing team's superstar. So when they come to a game and they find out Giannis Antetokounmpo is sitting, or Kawhi Leonard is sitting, or name that superstar that's sitting due to load management, due to injury management, it does really make you question whether or not you want to truly invest yourself in this game, knowing that they're trying to seek competitiveness, but then they do things that kind of aid more towards the entertainment value. There has to be a healthy mixture of the two, and that starts with having guys on the floor that can show the biggest jump in high level basketball. You're going to see the difference between a low level basketball game and a high level basketball game based on the star power on the floor on a night to night basis. I think that load management completely kills that and it hurts it in a real way. If you want to talk about competitive balance, it's one of the best things to help for the NBA. But we've also seen that it has its pros and its cons. Some have said load management has put players in position where they're not physically ready to be able to play in the excruciating conditions of the postseason, where it's more physical, where the calls are different, where the game is played in more of a half-court setting, right? So there's pros and cons to load management across the board, but the name of the game is entertainment. What's the most entertaining is seeing our stars play on the floor every single night if they're able to. Period, point blank. But that's been another edition of the Routine Jumper Daily Podcast. Remember to like, comment, and subscribe. Let me know in the comment section down below what kind of topics you would like me to talk about on the podcast moving forward when it comes to these Rapid Fire Fridays. Again, these could be random players, random role players, teams that don't get talked about in the media very often because they don't have the same glitz and glamour that the Lakers and the Golden State Warriors have. It could be some statistics that you guys want me to deep dive into, the best three-point shooters, the most underrated players at XYZ positions. I'm open to anything and everything when it comes to Rapid Fire Friday, because it's a different construct of podcast versus the other 4 days, where it's still my thoughts, but it's a lot of news and stuff oriented as well, as opposed to Rapid Fire Friday is just some basketball thoughts I have that I want to share with you guys and get thoughts shared back from you to help me figure out what's going on in the league nowadays. So again, this has been another edition of the Routine Jumper Daily Podcast. Remember to hit that post notification bell so you always know when we're dropping new videos. And with all that being said, I'll see you guys next time. Peace.